The hum of tires meets the hiss of a grill. A waitress slides a steaming plate of fried eggs under neon light, while a truck idles outside under a red Route 66 shield. It's the 1950s, and the highway is the country's main street, connecting small-town kitchens, roadside diners, and travelers chasing work or wonder. Inside, every counter stool has a story. Food comes fast, hot, and cheap. Coffee poured non-stop, pies stacked high, smells of bacon, onions, and grease blending into memory. The clatter of plates and the glow of chrome make a rhythm that never really stops. From Illinois to California, Route 66 carried millions. Soldiers returning from war, migrants seeking jobs, families on vacation. All stopped to eat. Diners became equalizers. You didn't need reservations, just change and appetite. Each menu showed the mix of America itself: Midwestern staples, Southwestern spice, and immigrant invention. Behind every plate stood a cook balancing thrift, timing, and pride. These 25 diner foods tell how America actually ate when gas was cheap, jukeboxes sang, and the open road promised freedom. The first stretch of Route 66, Illinois through Missouri, was diner country long before the interstates came. Countertops gleamed, menus were short, and coffee never ran dry. Truckers, traveling salesmen, and local families all shared the same stools, elbows almost touching. What mattered wasn't the view outside, but what landed on the plate: reliable, fast, and filling enough to keep travelers rolling from sunrise to dusk. 1. Hot roast beef sandwich with gravy. Every diner along the early highway had its version of the hot roast beef sandwich. Thick slices of slow-roasted beef piled on soft white bread, drowned in rich brown gravy that tasted of drippings and onions. The meat was often yesterday's roast, stretched across tomorrow's lunches. It wasn't fancy, but it was steady. Meat, bread, and warmth on a plate. For truckers and mechanics, this was the reward after miles of asphalt or hours under the hood. It symbolized value, a full stomach without emptying the wallet. In its dark gravy and simple presentation lay the diner's promise: plenty for everyone, no questions asked. 2. Meatloaf plate with mashed potatoes. If there was a national comfort food of the post-war highway, it was meatloaf. Every cook had their version: beef scraps and breadcrumbs, a hint of onion, maybe ketchup baked on top. Sliced thick beside mashed potatoes and brown gravy, it brought a sense of home even in the hum of a strange town. Meatloaf was the great equalizer: cheap, hearty, familiar. Diners could stretch a few pounds of beef into a dozen plates, feeding shift workers and salesmen alike. During ration years and after, it kept its spot on every counter menu. That first forkful was recognition. No matter how far you'd driven, you'd arrived somewhere safe enough to rest and eat. 3. Fried pork tenderloin sandwich. Somewhere past Springfield, the smell of hot oil and pork cutlets meant you were in the Midwest proper. The fried pork tenderloin sandwich wasn't shy. It spilled over its bun in a crisp halo, daring you to finish it. Pounded thin, dredged in crumbs, fried golden in a cast-iron pan, it was both quick and generous. Hog country's abundance met diner speed, and the result became a regional icon. Farmers hauling feed and salesmen chasing quotas could count on that crunch and salt to power them through the afternoon. It was proud heartland food, big, brash, and unapologetically filling. Even newcomers learned to eat it with both hands and a grin. First open-faced turkey sandwich. This one belonged to lunch counters and corner booths: a slice of white bread, a heap of carved turkey, and a ladle of gravy that tied everything together. A spoonful of peas or mashed potatoes often shared the plate. The secret was thrift. Diners roasted a few birds on Sunday, then turned leftovers into comfort all week. It tasted like holidays, even on a Tuesday. For travelers far from home, that familiar smell of roasted meat and warm gravy could stop loneliness in its tracks. The open-faced sandwich was generosity on display. Simple food served openly, just like the people who made it. 5. Chili with saltine crackers. Every stretch of Route 66 claimed to have the best chili. In Missouri, It might be thick with beans, farther west, spicier and leaner. What never changed was the sight of a steaming bowl beside a sleeve of soda crackers. The chili pot sat at the back of every diner, bubbling from morning until close. Made with ground beef, canned tomatoes, onions, and whatever spice a cook favored, it was the meal that never failed. Cheap to make, easy to reheat, filling to the last spoonful. For night drivers or factory workers off shift, chili meant warmth in the belly and a few quiet minutes off the road. It was universal, adaptable, and endlessly debated. Every town along the route claimed their version as the true one. In that sense, chili was Route 66 itself, the same road, told 100 different ways. 6. Chicken fried steak with gravy. In the southern stretch of Route 66, where the road rolled past cotton fields and small town squares, the scent of hot oil and pepper gravy meant one thing: chicken fried steak was on the griddle. It wasn't chicken at all, of course. Just a thrifty piece of round steak, pounded thin to tenderness, dipped in seasoned flour, and fried until it looked golden enough to fool the eye. The skillet hissed, the crust blistered, and then came the slow ladle of white gravy speckled with black pepper. Diners used the cheapest cuts and made them proud. Cooks knew how to stretch what they had, turning toughness into tenderness and frugality into comfort. For travelers and locals alike, it was a victory of flavor over circumstance. This was Southern thrift turned into satisfaction, eaten with a fork and a sigh before heading back out to the road. 7. Biscuits. Sausage gravy. By dawn, the Ozark air carried the smell of biscuits before sunlight touched the windows. In every diner along the road, the same rhythm played out. Biscuit dough rolled and cut before 5 a.m., sausage sizzling in a pan, flour stirred into the drippings until it thickened into gravy. A little milk, a pinch of salt, and breakfast was ready for whoever walked through the door first. The plates were cheap, the portions generous, and the refills endless. It was food for the early crowd, the men heading for construction jobs, the farmers dropping by before tending fields, the travelers leaving town before traffic woke. Biscuits and gravy weren't just breakfast. They were reassurance that the day could begin right. Every bite spoke of care and patience, the same qualities it took to drive a long road with faith in what waited ahead. In those quiet morning booths, the world felt steady again. 8. Fried catfish plate. Near the rivers and creeks that threaded through Missouri and northern Arkansas, catfish made the menu because it made sense. You could catch it cheap, cook it quick, and feed a crowd. Dipped in cornmeal and fried to a crisp, it came out of the pan with an edge that whispered when you bit in. Hush puppies browned in the same oil, slaw cut thin on the side, and a wedge of lemon or vinegar bottle always nearby. These plates were local pride made edible, the water's gift to the table. Diners sometimes hung signs boasting fresh catch today, though everyone knew it had been frozen since Friday, but nobody minded. It tasted of the place, of riverbanks and summer nights, of towns that lived close to what they ate. For a traveler, it was a postcard you could taste, proof that the road still belonged to the people who lived along it. 9. Country ham redeye gravy. In a skillet blackened from years of use, a slice of salt-cured ham hit the heat and spoke with a hiss. The smell filled the diner before sunrise, smoky, sharp, and familiar. Country ham was the Southern traveler's breakfast of choice, salty, chewy, and built to last. Before refrigeration, it was road food, packed for journeys and sliced thin to stretch. The gravy that followed, made from a splash of black coffee swirled through the leftover ham fat, was called redeye, a name born from its sheen in the pan. It was thin, savory, and strong as the people who loved it. You could pour it over grits, sop it with biscuits, or drink it if the morning demanded courage. Every diner had its version, every cook their balance of coffee and salt. Eating it wasn't just nostalgia, it was communion with every kitchen that kept going through lean years and early mornings. 10. Homemade pie slice, pecan, or chess. Some diners built their reputations on coffee, others lived or died by pie. Behind the counter, under glass domes, the colors told the story. Amber pecan, golden chess, chocolate, coconut, or buttermilk. In the Ozarks and southern Missouri, pie wasn't dessert. It was proof of pride. The crusts were rolled on flour-dusted tables before sunrise, fillings stirred by memory, not recipe. The ingredients were simple: sugar, eggs, butter, syrup, but the result was something that stopped conversation when it hit the table. Truckers swore by the pecan pie at one stop and the chess pie at the next. Families ordered slices to split, one fork apiece, before piling back into the car. A slice of pie meant pause, sweetness, and thanks for the miles behind. It wasn't just an ending. It was the promise that the road ahead would hold another diner, another plate, another kindness waiting behind a counter. 11. Chicken Dumplings Bowl. Stewed chicken with hand-cut dumplings was the bowl that met travelers halfway between appetite and rest. The chicken started as leftovers, or a thrifty bird bought on special, broken down so every bone could give itself to the broth. The pot simmered low until the meat loosened and the stock turned deep and savory. Dumplings followed, pinched or rolled by hand, dropping into the bubbling surface and swelling as they soaked up flavor. A little onion, a bay leaf if on hand, and patience did the rest. Diners loved it because one bird stretched into many bowls, and nothing tasted rushed. On cold plains mornings, steam lifted like a promise. On hot afternoons, it steadied an empty stomach without fuss. It made sense in Oklahoma kitchens used to making plenty from little, where time at the stove was cheaper than extra meat. Meaning lived in the spoon, a farmhouse tradition carried onto the highway, a quiet lesson that care turns scraps into comfort and teaches the road to slow down long enough for gratitude. 12. Frito pie corn chips topped with chili and cheese became the Panhandle's cheerful shortcut to satisfaction. A small bag split open, a ladle of chili slid in, a scatter of grated cheese, maybe onions or jalapenos, and supper was ready to walk. The method was pure counter magic. Use what's already hot, what's already handy, and give it a bit of theater by serving right in the bag. Cooks loved it because there were no plates to wash, no timing to miss, and kids loved it because it felt like carnival food on a Tuesday. It was cheap, fast, and loud, ideal for families pulling off the road or drivers who refused to lose momentum. The dish made sense where Texan practicality met diner improvisation. Chips from the shelf, chili from the back pot, flavor from the first bite. Its meaning ran deeper than a gimmick. It turned convenience into culture, stitched the region's love of chili to America's taste for snack food, and reminded everyone that fun belongs at the table. On Route 66, it became a handheld souvenir of the Southwest, proof that speed and pleasure can share the same paper bag. 13. Barbecue brisket plate. Smoked beef brisket sliced thin with sauce and bread was the point where diner met smokehouse and the road exhaled. Brisket isn't tender by nature, so pit time turned it into something worthy of a pause. Hours over wood, rubs set like bark, fat rendering slow until every slice shone. Diners folded that craft into their menus, plating thin ribbons of beef beside white bread, pickles, onions, and a house sauce confident enough to step back. The method cue was patience, not gadgetry. Let smoke and salt do work that heat alone never could. It was available along the Texas stretch because pits lived behind cafes and families guarded techniques like heirlooms. Barbecue joined diner culture the way travelers joined towns, temporarily, then permanently, by falling in love. The meaning sat in the smoke that clung to hair and clothes long after the meal. Hospitality you could smell. It said the highway wasn't just a line between places. It was a place itself, with a flavor that couldn't be rushed. A welcome pulled from fire and wood and offered on a simple plate. 14. Cornbread. Pinto beans stewed soft and served with warm cornbread were the plate that never apologized for thrift. The pot started early. Pintos rinsed, covered, and set to a gentle simmer with onion, salt, and, if fortune smiled, a scrap of pork. Hours later, the beans were tender and the broth satin thick, ready for the crumble of cornmeal bread baked in a well-greased pan. Nothing about it was complicated. Everything about it was enough. During the Depression, the combination kept families steady. and post-war diners kept it because sense doesn't go out of style. It was always available. Beans are cheap, cornmeal cheaper, and it fit the long rhythm of a day when time at a low flame cost less than extra meat. Meaning rested in the way diners served it without pity, just pride. A poverty meal transformed into a tradition that nourished body and memory alike. Each spoonful honored cooks who knew the difference between simple and small, and refused to confuse the two. On Route 66, it fed workers, wanderers, and anyone who believed dignity fits just fine in a humble bowl. 15. Chicken fried chicken sandwich. A breaded fried chicken breast sandwich marked the moment roadside. America picked up speed without dropping comfort. A boneless breast was pounded thin, seasoned, dredged in flour, and pan-fried in lard until bubbles kissed the crust and edges curled. Laid onto a soft bun with lettuce and a swipe of mayo, it delivered the pleasures of a plate in the language of one-handed eating. The cue was efficiency, the same skills as a sit-down supper, refit for a windshield view. It became available as diners learned to serve drivers quickly, borrowing ideas from curb service and drive-ins while keeping skillet craft intact. Its meaning was more than modern convenience. It was a sign that tradition could adapt and keep its soul. The same crackle, the same savory heat, the same comfort, now timed for a nation on the move. People bit in and tasted both porch and pavement, yesterday's kitchen and tomorrow's highway. The sandwich proved that progress doesn't have to taste new, it can taste right. And on the Oklahoma to Texas stretch, right meant hot, crisp, generous, and ready when the road called again. 16. Green-chile cheeseburger. The grill man split a patty, pressed it to the flames, and laid roasted green chiles across the top so the heat woke their perfume. A blanket of cheese followed, melted just long enough to drape meat and chili into a single bite. In New Mexico, this wasn't a gimmick. It was how the roadside taught the burger to speak local. Hatch chilies were roasted in baskets on sidewalks each fall, bagged and frozen so diners could serve that smoky heat year-round. Flame-grilled beef met the sweet bite of charred chili and the soft pull of American or cheddar, set on a toasted bun with a modest smear of mayo or mustard. It was available because the supply chain was simple. Cattle from nearby ranges, chilies from fields just down the road, a flat top or open flame out back. The meaning lived in the first mouthful. America's sandwich stamped with the Southwest, a mile marker you could taste, equal parts highway speed and desert sun. 17. Tamale plate with chili sauce. A tamale plate arrived like a small ceremony. Corn husks folded neat, masa tender under the touch, meat filling seasoned with cumin and garlic, then the whole parcel smothered in chili until the edges shimmered. In diners from Tucumcari to Gallup, the method stayed steady. Steam the tamales until the mesa set. Ladle hot chili over the roe. Scatter a little onion or cheese if the cook felt generous. These were not precious restaurant showpieces. They were everyday plates shaped by Mexican and Mexican-American cooks who knew how to stretch maize into comfort. Diners carried them because customers asked for them, because families working the highway brought their recipes and their patience to the line, because corn and chili were as common here as coffee and eggs. The dish made sense in a place where cultures met at the counter and shook hands. Meaning was plain. The highway could be loud and fast, but a tamale slowed time, wrapped memory in a husk, and let travelers eat heritage with a fork. Huevos rancheros. Morning in the high desert started hot on the tongue. Huevos rancheros was the quick skillet truth. Tortillas laid down to warm, eggs fried until the whites set and the yolks stayed soft, a spoon of bright red or green salsa across the top, beans along the side. Short order cooks loved it because the timing sang. 2 minutes for the tortillas, a minute more for the eggs. Salsa warmed in a spare pan, played out before the coffee cooled. It was available in nearly every borderland diner because the ingredients were humble and universal. Eggs, chilies, tomatoes, beans, corn. Truckers ordered it for the kick. Families ordered it for the color. Locals ordered it to say the day had truly begun. What it meant was more than spice. It was pride on a budget, a ranch breakfast translated for the counter, proof that a dish doesn't need ceremony to carry a place in its heat, its smoke, and its easy speed. 19. Chicken enchilada plate. Rolled tortillas tucked around seasoned chicken, bathed in red or green chili sauce, baked until the cheese loosened and pooled at the corners. Enchiladas were the crossroads made edible. In Arizona, diners folded them into menus alongside burgers and meatloaf, a sign that the road was broad enough for many comforts at once. The method kept to essentials: shred last night's chicken or simmer fresh thighs, soften tortillas in a little fat, roll, sauce, and bake until the room smelled like roasted chilies and corn. It was available because pantry and practice lined up. Canned chilies or house-made, a hotel pan, a hot oven, a cook who knew how to feed 10 plates at once. For travelers, it felt generous; for locals, familiar. The meaning was simple and kind. A plate that welcomed strangers without making them leave their tastes behind. A soft, saucy assurance that the desert could be tender too. Hearty, homemade milkshake with whipped cream. The milkshake didn't care what the map said. It belonged to jukebox songs and chrome stools, to paper hats and sticky counters, to the clink of a metal mixer cup set beside a frosted glass. The method was half science, half rhythm. Scoops of ice cream, a pull of syrup, a splash of milk, blended until the vortex thickened and the blender's pitch dropped to a satisfied hum. Poured high, crowned with a cloud of whipped cream, maybe a cherry if the cook was sweet on the day. Diners in New Mexico and Arizona kept shakes because soda fountains lived inside them. Teenagers after school, families on vacation, servicemen off duty. It was available anywhere a freezer and a spindle mixer could fit. Cheap to make, impossible to forget. Meaning? The sound of America's youth, cold, sweet, and timeless, served alongside the spicy plates that told you where you were, reminding you that the open road still saved room for joy. By the time the desert opened wide and the mesas threw long shadows, Route 66 had already taught 100 flavors how to share a counter: beans and burgers, biscuits and chili, tamales and pie. These weren't just meals. 21. Patty melt on rye. The patty melt felt like California deciding a burger could dress like a sandwich and still taste like the road. What it is: a ground beef patty seared hard, onions cooked down until sweet, cheese melted into the seams, all pressed between slices of buttered rye. How? The flat top did the work: griddle sizzle, a flip, onions spread, then the rye toasted in butter until the edges went mottled and crisp. The spatula pressed bread and meat together so the cheese bridged every gap. The onions kept the bite gentle. The rye added a toasty tang that a plain bun never could. Why available? West Coast diners loved speed and theater, and this borrowed East Coast rye and deli sensibility, then fused it with burger culture born of roadside grills. Deli, diner, and drive all met at the hot steel. Meaning, the bridge between burger and sandwich culture, proof that a counter cook could remix tradition without losing comfort. Plates slid across chrome, halves stacked, cheese tethering them like a hinge. Portable, familiar, a little stylish, and exactly right at the end of a long day's miles. 2. Club sandwich with potato chips. The club sandwich was a small skyscraper built from leftovers and confidence. What it is: triple-decker turkey, bacon, lettuce, tomato, and a thin swipe of mayo, quartered and pinned with toothpicks, potato chips piled beside like gravel around a foundation. How? Toast 3 slices of bread, layer meat and vegetables so each bite gets salt, crunch, juice, and cool. Press lightly. Slice diagonally so the cross-section sells itself. The geometry mattered. Clean corners, tidy quarters, chips crackling at the edges. Why available? Lunch rush demanded speed, and roast turkeys, bacon, and tomatoes already prepped for breakfast service were close at hand. The club turned yesterday's roasts and today's bacon into something that looked abundant and ate fast. Meaning, a symbol of post-war plenty and polish, stacked, orderly, photogenic before anyone had a camera handy. It tasted like office breaks, family vacations, and motel pools, like the decision to keep driving another 100 miles because the car was full and everyone felt taken care of. In the glass case, pie stood for dessert, On plates, the club stood for noon. 23. Tuna salad plate. The tuna plate was the 1950s idea of light. A molded scoop, some crackers or a frilled lettuce leaf, maybe a tomato wedge and a lemon slice that glowed under fluorescent bulbs. What it is, canned tuna folded with mayo, celery, and a little relish until it held together without clumping, salty enough to wake the tongue, mild enough to read as modern. How? Open the tin, drain well, fold with cold ingredients, chill just long enough to tighten, serve cool for the midday crowd. The ring-molded dome arrived with a faint wobble, a sprig of parsley doing more work than its size suggested. Why available? Wartime ration habits taught America to trust the can, and diners kept that trust in peacetime. Cheap, dependable protein that didn't ask for the grill. Meaning, the era's health-conscious plate, neat and tidy, designed for people wanting something clean and efficient before getting back on the road or back to work. It carried a touch of coastal fantasy even far from the ocean, the taste of a promise stamped modern in tidy letters. It was quiet food, competent food, and a reminder that not every diner choice had to arrive sizzling. 24. Hot apple pie a la mode. Apple pie at the end of the line tasted like a postcard mailed home. What it is, a thick wedge of cinnamon-sweet apples under a crimped crust, served warm so the scoop of vanilla slumps into the seams and glazes the plate. How? Rewarm a house pie until the filling shivers and the crust wakes. Add the cold scoop at the pass. Let steam and frost argue until a shiny truce appears. The fork cut clean through sugared crust into tender fruit, and each bite carried both bakery heat and ice cream chill. Why available soda fountain habits and diner pride, flour, sugar, apples, and patience, made pie a daily promise, and ready ice cream lived in every back freezer by mid-century. A slice wasn't wasteful. It was advertising for the soul. Meaning, sweet nostalgia, a classic end to the road and a reason to linger for one more cup of coffee. Even travelers who swore they were too full found room. Even locals who'd seen the sunset from the same booth all year still said yes. Pie proved the day had been worth the trouble, and that the road ahead could be kind. Choiced a coffee cup on the counter. The last order was almost always coffee. What it is, a heavy mug refilled from a chrome pot, kept hot on the burner and poured like a handshake. How? Fresh pots every hour, cups warmed by habit, the pour judged by sound more than sight. The ring of spoon on ceramic, a small bell through the room. Sugar packets stood in squares. Creamers made pale suns in the dark. Why available? Beans were cheap. Coffee was timing itself. Keeping truckers awake, cooks alert, waitresses moving, and conversation soft-footed across the tiles. Diners did many things, but they were built around this ritual. Meaning, the true symbol of the open road. Connection and pause. You could sit alone and not feel lonely, or sit with friends and feel the day loosen. Refill after refill turned minutes into a kind of grace. The cup marked arrivals and departures, shifts beginning and ending, lives passing through the same warm light. On Route 66, coffee wasn't merely a drink. It was the road's pulse, steady and generous, reminding everyone that a place that keeps the pot on is a place that keeps its promise. Together, these plates form a map drawn not with ink, but with hunger and hope. Every stretch of Route 66 fed a different idea of America: roast beef and cornbread for the working class, biscuits and gravy for comfort, tamales and enchiladas for heritage, and milkshakes for joy. The Midwest offered steadiness, the South gave warmth, the Southwest brought fire, and California finished with lightness and shine. Ingredients shifted with the land, but the heart behind them stayed constant. Feed travelers quickly, feed them well, and send them back to the road with a little more strength than they arrived. Diners weren't monuments to luxury. They were acts of trust. You stopped not for spectacle, but for belonging. Behind every counter stood a cook who knew how to stretch the day's supplies, a waitress who called you hon, and a pot of coffee that never judged how long you lingered. The plates may change, The neon may fade, but the feeling remains. Warmth that asks for nothing in return. By the 1970s, the new interstates cut away the crowds, and many diners went quiet. Yet their food never vanished. It just moved into memory and home kitchens. The old recipes still whisper from community cookbooks, black and white photos, and road trip stories passed down over supper. If this taste of America's open road brought back a smile or a memory, stick around. Subscribe, share your story, and help keep these flavors, and the people who made them, alive one plate at a time. Historical best effort, sources noted in description, vintage menus, newspapers, oral histories, archives. Research draws from diner cookbooks, WPA food reports, root town papers, and oral recollections. Individual menus varied by region, supplier, and decade, but the spirit was the same. Care, thrift, and pride served hot.